Stop. Before you take another bite of food today, I need you to stay right here for just a moment. Because what I'm about to share with you is something most people over 50 will never hear from their doctor. And yet, it may be the single most important thing you can do for your digestion, your energy, and your metabolism, starting today before your very next meal. I have spent 24 years in surgical medicine. I have seen thousands of patients come in with the same quiet complaints: bloating that never fully goes away, a heaviness after eating that used to not be there, cravings at night that feel completely out of your control, energy that drops in the afternoon for no clear reason. And almost every single time, the root cause was not the food they were eating. It was something happening, or more accurately, something not happening in the seconds before they even took a bite. There's a 90-second ritual that can begin to fix this today. It costs you nothing. It requires no special diet, no supplements, no gym. And the science behind it is real, well studied, and completely ignored by mainstream health advice. Stay with me because in the next few minutes, I am going to walk you through everything you need to understand about why digestion slows after 50, what is actually happening inside your body, and exactly how this one small ritual can begin to reverse it. I am also going to share information that goes well beyond what most health videos cover, including how your nervous system, your gut bacteria, your stress hormones, and even the timing of your meals all connect to this one central problem. If bloating, slow digestion, low energy after meals, or unexplained cravings have been quietly frustrating you, you are in exactly the right place. I am Dr. Megan Foster. Let's get into this. The first thing I want you to understand is something called the brain-gut connection. And I want to explain it in a way that actually makes sense. Not in medical textbook language, but in terms you can feel in your own body. Your digestive system is not a simple tube that food passes through while your stomach does all the work. It is actually a highly coordinated system that involves your brain, your nervous system, and dozens of organs all working together in a very specific sequence. And here's the critical part that almost nobody talks about. That sequence is supposed to begin before you eat a single bite of food. Think about this. Have you ever smelled something cooking and immediately felt your mouth fill with saliva? That is not random. That is your brain sending an emergency preparation signal to your entire digestive tract. Your stomach starts producing acid. Your pancreas gets ready to release enzymes. Your small intestine prepares to receive and process nutrients. Your gallbladder gets ready to release bile to break down fats. All of this begins to happen before food even touches your lips, simply because your brain detected that food was coming. This process has a name. It is called the cephalic phase response. Cephalic simply means related to the head or brain. And this response is one of the most powerful and most underappreciated drivers of good digestion that exists. Now, here's where things start to break down after 50. That signal, the one that starts the whole process, weakens. And it does not weaken because of age alone. It weakens because of a combination of factors that pile up over the years: chronic low-grade stress, eating quickly, eating while distracted, less exposure to aromatic food preparation, a gradual decline in certain neurotransmitters, and a reduction in the sensitivity of the nerve that controls this entire response. That nerve is called the vagus nerve. And I want to spend some real time explaining it because understanding it changes everything. The vagus nerve is the longest nerve in your body. It runs from your brainstem, through your neck, into your chest, and all the way down into your abdomen. It connects your brain to your heart, your lungs, your stomach, your small intestine, your large intestine, and your liver. It is the physical highway along which your brain talks to all of these organs. When your vagus nerve is active and communicating well, your digestion is coordinated, efficient, and comfortable. You eat, you feel satisfied, nutrients are absorbed properly, and your gut moves food through at a healthy pace. When your vagus nerve is underactive or firing weakly, the whole system struggles. Food moves through more slowly. Enzyme production is lower. Your stomach does not produce enough acid to fully break down protein. Your gut bacteria get disrupted because the environment changes. You feel heavy, bloated, and sluggish after meals. And your brain does not get a clear satiety signal, so you stay hungry or reach for more food even when you do not need it. This is not a theory. This is backed by decades of research in gastroenterology and neurology. A weakened vagus nerve connection is linked to slower gastric emptying, higher rates of bloating, worse blood sugar control, lower nutrient absorption, and increased food cravings. And the reason this gets worse after 50 is a combination of three things that happen almost universally. First, stress levels tend to be chronically elevated, even if they do not feel dramatic. Work stress, family stress, financial stress, or even the subtle psychological stress of aging and health concerns. Stress activates what is called your sympathetic nervous system, which is the fight or flight side of your nervous system. When that system is dominant, it actively suppresses your vagus nerve and your digestive signaling. Your body literally deprioritizes digestion when it thinks you are in danger. Second, lifestyle habits that reduce vagal stimulation accumulate over decades. Eating fast, eating in front of screens, not taking time to smell, appreciate, or even prepare food. These habits are extremely common, and they steadily erode the strength of your cephalic phase response. Third, hormonal changes after 50, especially in both men and women, alter the gut environment in ways that reduce motility, change gut bacteria populations, and further slow the communication between your gut and your brain. So the result is a system that is under-signaled, under-prepared, and underperforming every single time you sit down to eat. Now, here's where most people go wrong. When they notice these symptoms, they assume the problem is the food. They cut out gluten. They try dairy-free. They eliminate red meat. They experiment with supplements. They try probiotics. And sometimes those things help a little, but they are not addressing the root cause. The root cause is not what you are eating. It is how prepared your body is to receive and process what you are eating. And that preparation has to start in the nervous system before the food arrives. Now, I want to talk about something that most health content does not go near, and that is the specific science of what happens in your mouth and why it is so much more important than you think. Your mouth is not just the place where you chew food into smaller pieces. Your mouth is actually the first and most powerful sensory input station in your entire digestive process. The receptors in your mouth, your tongue, your palate, your gums, your throat, they are sending constant signals to your brain while you eat. And those signals are what trigger the full cascade of digestive preparation. When you chew slowly and deliberately, several things happen at the same time. Salivary enzymes called amylase begin breaking down carbohydrates before they even reach your stomach. This reduces the blood sugar spike you would otherwise get from starchy foods. Chewing also signals your brain via the trigeminal nerve, which is one of the major cranial nerves, to begin coordinating the rest of the digestive system. The longer and more deliberately you chew, the stronger that signal is. Research published by gastroenterology departments at several major institutions has shown that people who chew more thoroughly show measurably higher levels of satiety hormones after the same meal compared to people who eat quickly. They also show faster gastric emptying rates, meaning food moves through the stomach at a healthier pace, and they show significantly lower blood glucose spikes, which matters enormously for energy, cravings, and long-term metabolic health. But here's something that almost nobody talks about. The mechanical act of chewing is only part of the picture. The aromatic and sensory intensity of what you are chewing also matters enormously. Certain substances, when chewed slowly and held in the mouth, create a far more powerful neurological response than plain food. They activate more receptors. They send stronger signals. They create what researchers sometimes call a heightened cephalic phase response. And one of the most studied and most potent of these substances is something that has been sitting in your spice cabinet for years. Before I get to that, I want you to understand something about how your digestive system times its processes, because this is going to make the ritual make total sense. When food enters your stomach has to do several things. It has to churn the food. It has to mix it with hydrochloric acid to break down proteins. It has to mix it with pepsin, an enzyme that further digests protein. And it has to regulate the rate at which partially digested food moves into the small intestine. That rate, called gastric emptying, affects everything. Too fast, and you get blood sugar spikes and poor nutrient absorption. Too slow, and you get that heavy, full, uncomfortable feeling that can last for hours. The rate of gastric emptying is regulated largely by signals from your vagus nerve. And the strength of those signals depends heavily on how active your vagal system is before and during the meal. The studies looking at parasympathetic activation, which is simply the technical term for vagus nerve activity, and digestive outcomes show a consistent pattern. People with higher pre-meal vagal activation have faster, more efficient gastric emptying. They report significantly less post-meal bloating. They show better insulin sensitivity, meaning their cells respond more effectively to the insulin their pancreas releases. And they show lower levels of cortisol, the stress hormone, in the period after eating. Cortisol after meals is something very few people know about. When your vagal system is weak and your body is under stress, eating actually triggers a mild cortisol release. That cortisol then promotes fat storage, particularly around the abdomen. It also suppresses immune function, disrupts sleep, and increases cravings for high-calorie foods later in the day. This is part of why some people find that no matter how well they eat during the day, the evening cravings feel almost impossible to control. It is not a willpower problem. It is a signaling problem, and it is fixable. Now, let me also explain something about the gut-bacteria connection, because this is where the research has gotten genuinely fascinating in the last decade. Your gut is home to trillions of bacteria, viruses, and fungi that together make up what is called your gut microbiome. These microorganisms play a direct role in digestion, immune function, mood regulation, vitamin production, and metabolic health. And one of the things that most significantly shapes your gut microbiome is not just what you eat, but how well your digestive system is functioning when you eat it. When food is not properly broken down in the stomach due to low acid and poor enzymatic preparation, undigested food particles travel further into the intestine than they should. When those particles arrive in parts of the gut where they do not belong, they feed the wrong kinds of bacteria. That leads to fermentation, gas, bloating, and over time, a disruption of the healthy bacterial balance that keeps your gut functioning properly. This is one of the reasons that poor digestive signaling can create a self-reinforcing cycle. Weak vagal signal leads to poor digestion, which leads to gut bacteria disruption, which leads to inflammation, which leads to further disruption of the nerve-gut communication pathway, which leads to weaker signaling, round and round. Breaking that cycle requires intervening at the source, and the source is the neurological signal that prepares the system before food arrives. Now, I also want to address something important about stress because I think it is the single most underappreciated driver of digestive problems after 50, and yet it is the least talked about in the context of bloating and digestion. Your nervous system has two primary modes. You have the sympathetic mode, which is commonly called fight or flight, and you have the parasympathetic mode, which is commonly called rest and digest. These two systems are always in a kind of balance, like a seesaw. When one goes up, the other goes down. When you are stressed, even mildly and chronically, your sympathetic system is elevated. That means your parasympathetic system, your rest and digest system, is suppressed. And your vagus nerve, which is the primary driver of parasympathetic activity in your body, goes quiet. A quiet vagus nerve means poor digestive preparation. poor digestive preparation means every meal you eat is being processed by a system that is not fully switched on. And the result is the set of symptoms that so many people over 50 describe: the heaviness, the bloat, the sluggishness, the cravings, the energy crashes. Here's something I want you to sit with for a moment. Have you noticed that your digestion tends to be worse on days when you feel more rushed, more anxious, or more mentally overloaded? That is not coincidence. That is your nervous system directly suppressing your digestive function in real time. And have you noticed the opposite? That on calm, relaxed days, particularly when you have time to actually enjoy a meal, you feel better afterward? That also is not coincidence. Those are the days when your vagal system is more active, your cephalic phase response is stronger, and your digestion is functioning closer to how it should. The problem is that most people cannot simply decide to be calm and unhurried before every meal. Life does not work that way. What they need is a reliable, fast, and effective way to shift their nervous system into parasympathetic mode in the 90 seconds before they eat. And this is exactly what the ritual does. Let me now walk you through the full 3-step progression, because there is a logical order here that matters. And skipping to the end without understanding the foundation is going to cost you results. The first step in the progression is learning to slow down your first few bites. I know that sounds almost too simple, but the speed of your first bites sets the neurological tone for the entire meal. When you eat your first bites quickly, your brain does not have enough sensory input to initiate a strong digestive response. The signal is weak, the system starts late, and you spend the next 20 minutes eating into a digestive process that is running several steps behind. When you slow your first 3 bites and chew each one deliberately, at least twice as long as you normally would, your brain gets a stronger, clearer signal. More saliva is produced. More enzymatic activity begins. The vagal signal strengthens. And the rest of the meal is processed in a system that is already primed and ready. This is also one of the most effective and scientifically supported ways to reduce post-meal blood sugar spikes. When you chew carbohydrates more thoroughly, salivary amylase breaks down more of the starch in the mouth before it even reaches the stomach. This means less of a blood sugar load hits your bloodstream at once. For people over 50 who are managing blood sugar or who are concerned about energy crashes in the afternoon, this alone can make a noticeable difference. The practical application here is very simple. At the start of every meal, choose your first 3 bites intentionally. Put your fork or spoon down between each one. Chew slowly and completely. Do not pick the fork back up until you have swallowed. And for those first 3 bites, your phone stays face down. That single habit, practiced consistently, will begin to shift your digestive baseline within a few weeks. The second step in the progression is pre-meal aromatic stimulation. This is where things get more interesting from a neurological standpoint. Your sense of smell is the only sense that has a direct pathway to the brain without going through a relay station first. Every other sense, sight, sound, touch, taste, goes through a part of the brain called the thalamus before reaching your conscious awareness. Smell bypasses that entirely. It goes straight to the olfactory bulb, which connects directly to the parts of the brain that regulate memory, emotion, and crucially, the autonomic nervous system, which is the system that controls your vagal activity. This means that smell is one of the fastest and most direct ways to influence your nervous system state. And it means that the aromas you expose yourself to before and during eating have a real and measurable effect on your digestive readiness. Specifically, aromatic compounds from herbs and spices stimulate nerve endings in the nasal passages and oral cavity. Those nerve endings send signals that increase parasympathetic tone, stimulate saliva production, increase stomach acid readiness, and trigger bile release from the gallbladder, all before you eat a single calorie. This is why cultures around the world that include strong aromatic herbs and spices in their cooking report far lower rates of digestive complaints than those that eat relatively bland processed diets. The aromatic stimulation is not just flavoring. It is neurological preparation. Bitter herbs in particular have a special role here. Bitters, which include things like dandelion, gentian, and certain spices, stimulate what are called bitter taste receptors, not just on your tongue, but throughout your gastrointestinal tract. When those receptors fire, they send a cascade of signals that increase digestive enzyme output, stimulate bile flow, and increase gut motility. This is why, in traditional European medicine, bitter drinks were consumed before meals for centuries. The cultural practice existed long before anyone understood the mechanism behind it. So, the practical second step is to incorporate some form of aromatic stimulation before you eat. This can be as simple as briefly smelling your food before eating it, or having a small amount of something with a strong natural aroma, fresh herbs, a small piece of ginger, or something with a concentrated aromatic compound that activates these receptors intensely. Which brings us to the third and most powerful step. One whole clove, placed in your mouth, chewed slowly for 60 to 90 seconds. Before I explain exactly what this does, I want to address the first thing most people think when they hear this. Cloves? That seems strange, and I understand that. But I want to walk you through the actual biology because once you understand it, it stops seeming strange and starts seeming obvious. Cloves contain one of the highest concentrations of a compound called eugenol found in any natural food substance. Eugenol is an aromatic molecule found in plants, and eugenol has several specific and well-documented effects on the nervous system and digestive process when it makes contact with the lining of your mouth. First, eugenol is a powerful activator of the nerve endings in your mouth, gums, and throat. These nerve endings have direct communication pathways to the brainstem where your vagal control centers are located. When eugenol activates these nerve endings, it sends a strong, clear signal upward into the brain that something with significant biological importance is in the mouth. The brain responds by ramping up digestive preparation. Second, eugenol has been shown in research to have a direct stimulatory effect on saliva production. And not just the quantity of saliva, but the quality. Saliva produced in response to intense oral stimulation contains higher concentrations of amylase, the enzyme that breaks down starches, and higher concentrations of other protective proteins. This saliva is functionally more useful for initiating digestion than the thin, low-enzyme saliva produced by distracted, rushed eating. Third, the warming sensation that you feel when you chew a clove is not just a sensation. It is a sign of increased circulation in the oral tissues. That increased circulation enhances the speed at which aromatic molecules are absorbed through the lining of the mouth and into the bloodstream where they can act throughout the body. Some of the eugenol absorbed through the mouth reaches the liver quickly where it influences metabolic enzyme activity. Fourth, and this is perhaps the most important part, the intense sensory experience of chewing a clove for 60 to 90 seconds forces a particular kind of mental presence. You cannot chew a clove while scrolling through your phone and remaining fully distracted. The sensation is too strong and too immediate. This enforced presence, this slowing down and actually being in your body for 90 seconds, is itself a vagal activation mechanism. The research on mindfulness and digestion is very clear on this point. Even brief moments of sensory presence before eating measurably increase parasympathetic activation and improve digestive outcomes. So when you chew one clove slowly for 60 to 90 seconds before your largest meal, you are doing several things simultaneously. You are activating nerve pathways that communicate directly with your vagal control centers. You are flooding your mouth with high-quality, enzyme-rich saliva. You are stimulating bitter and aromatic receptors that trigger digestive preparation cascades. You are increasing the absorption of bioactive compounds into your bloodstream. And you are forcing yourself into a state of present-moment sensory awareness that independently activates the parasympathetic nervous system. The result is a digestive system that is genuinely prepared to receive and process food the moment the first bite arrives. Many people notice a difference the very first time they try this. A reduced heaviness after the meal, a feeling of actually being satisfied rather than stuffed, less gas and bloating in the hours that follow, and a calmer, more settled feeling in the abdomen overall. These are not placebo effects, though I want to address the placebo question directly because it is a fair one. Anytime you hear something like this, the skeptical part of your brain might say, well, maybe people just feel better because they believe they will, and that is a legitimate concern. But the mechanisms I have just described are real, measurable, and documented. The changes in saliva composition, the nerve activation, the increase in vagal tone, these can be measured in a laboratory. And the downstream effects on gastric secretion, gastric emptying rate, and blood sugar response have been observed in controlled conditions. This is not alternative medicine or folk remedy territory. This is applied physiology. Now, I want to talk about something that nobody else covers in conversations like this, and that is the relationship between this ritual and your long-term metabolic health. Metabolism after 50 changes. Most people know this in a general sense, but most people do not understand the specific mechanisms, and without understanding them, it is impossible to work with your body instead of against it. One of the most significant metabolic changes after 50 is a reduction in insulin sensitivity. Insulin is the hormone your pancreas releases when your blood sugar rises after eating. It tells your cells to take up glucose from the bloodstream and use it for energy. When your cells are sensitive to insulin, this process is efficient. Blood sugar rises, insulin is released, glucose enters the cells, blood sugar comes back down. Smooth, clean, efficient. When your cells become less sensitive to insulin, which happens gradually with age, stress, poor sleep, and chronic low-grade inflammation, that process becomes sluggish. Your pancreas has to release more insulin to get the same effect. Blood sugar stays elevated longer, and excess glucose that cannot be used by cells gets converted to fat, particularly the kind that builds up around the abdominal organs. That fat then produces inflammatory compounds that further worsen insulin sensitivity, creating another self-reinforcing cycle. Here's the connection to the vagus nerve and digestion. Strong vagal activation before and during meals has been shown to improve insulin sensitivity in the post-meal period. Researchers measuring insulin response in subjects with high versus low pre-meal vagal activity found that high vagal activation was associated with a faster, more efficient insulin response and lower post-meal blood glucose levels, even when both groups ate identical meals. This means that the ritual is not just about reducing bloating. It is actively influencing your metabolic response to every meal. It is changing the hormonal environment in which your body processes food. And over time, with consistent practice, those changes accumulate. Think about it this way. If you eat your largest meal of the day 365 days a year, and every single time you eat that meal, your body handles the blood sugar load more efficiently because your vagal activation is stronger, the compounding effect on your metabolic health over months and years is significant. Not dramatic in any single day, but real and accumulating. This is why I encourage people not to think of this as a short-term experiment. The 30-day challenge I am going to give you toward the end of this video is just a starting point. The real goal is to make this a permanent feature of how you eat. Now I want to spend a few minutes on something called post-meal cortisol because I mentioned it earlier, and I want to go deeper because it connects directly to the evening cravings problem that so many people over 50 struggle with. Cortisol is often called the stress hormone, which is accurate but incomplete. Cortisol is also a metabolic hormone that plays a role in energy regulation, blood sugar management, and inflammation control. It rises naturally in the morning to help you wake up and get going. It should taper off through the afternoon and be very low in the evening. When your vagal system is underactive and your sympathetic nervous system is chronically elevated, your cortisol rhythm gets disrupted. Instead of a clean morning peak and gradual decline, you get an irregular pattern where cortisol stays elevated longer, or rises in the afternoon, or spikes in the evening. Evening cortisol spikes are one of the primary drivers of late-night cravings. When cortisol rises in the evening, it triggers appetite signals and specifically increases cravings for high carbohydrate, high fat foods. This is a biological response originally designed to help our ancestors replenish energy reserves before sleeping. But in the modern context, where food is constantly available and we are rarely actually energy depleted in the evening, it drives unnecessary caloric intake that disrupts sleep, promotes fat storage, and continues the cycle. Strong pre-meal vagal activation during the day helps regulate cortisol rhythm. Not immediately, not on the first day, but over weeks of consistent practice, the parasympathetic system gets stronger and the cortisol pattern begins to normalize. People consistently report, usually around the 3 to 4 week mark, that evening cravings begin to feel less intense and more manageable. Not because their willpower increased, but because their hormonal signaling got cleaner. This is one of the most meaningful changes people experience from this ritual, and it is one that is very hard to explain until you understand the nervous system and cortisol connection. Now let me talk about the practical mechanics of doing this correctly, because there are some common mistakes that reduce the effectiveness of the ritual significantly. The first common mistake is rushing through it. 60 to 90 seconds sounds like a short amount of time, but most people, when they first try this, chew for about 20 seconds and then feel like they are done. Do not rush. Set a timer if you need to. The full 60 to 90 seconds is not arbitrary. It is the amount of time needed for the nerve signaling cascade to reach full activation. Cutting it short is like turning on a switch and immediately turning it off before the lights come on. The second common mistake is doing it while distracted. The phone, the television, the conversation in the background. These are not neutral. They pull your nervous system back toward the fight or flight mode. For 90 seconds, you need to be fully present. Notice the warmth. Notice the saliva. Notice the sensation spreading through your jaw and throat. That noticing is part of the mechanism. The third common mistake is doing it inconsistently. 1 day on, 2 days off. The effects of vagal training are cumulative. You are not just getting a single dose effect from each clove. You are training your nervous system over time to have a stronger baseline parasympathetic response. That training requires repetition. Daily practice, at minimum 5 to 6 days per week, is what produces the lasting change. The fourth common mistake is using too many cloves. 1 is the dose. 1 whole clove chewed slowly. Some people think that more must be better. It is not. 1 clove is the right amount. Consistent, daily, 1 clove. And a note on safety. If you have any sensitivity in your mouth or gums, start with just a small portion of 1 clove and work up gradually. If you are on blood-thinning medications, please check with your physician first, as cloves have mild anticoagulant properties at higher doses. For the vast majority of adults over 50 with no specific contraindications, 1 clove before meals is completely safe and well tolerated. Now, I want to share something that I think puts this all together in a way that is deeply motivating if you really let it sink in. The reason most health advice fails is not that the information is wrong. It is that the advice focuses on content without addressing context. Content is what you eat. Context is the state your body is in when you eat it. And after 50, the context problem is almost always bigger than the content problem. You can eat the most nutrient-dense, thoughtfully prepared meal in the world. If you eat it while stressed, rushed, and distracted, your vagal system is suppressed, your digestive preparation is weak, and your body is going to process that meal poorly. Lower enzyme activity means lower nutrient absorption. Higher cortisol means more fat storage signaling. Faster eating means a delayed satiety signal and a higher chance of overeating. Conversely, if you take 90 seconds before that meal to activate your vagal system deliberately, even if the meal itself is not perfect, your body is in a better state to receive and process it. The machinery is on, the enzymes are ready, the signals are firing, and the whole downstream process runs more efficiently. This is not an excuse to eat poorly. It is a recognition that the how of eating matters as much as the what. And most people spend enormous amounts of time and money optimizing the what while completely neglecting the how. The 90-second ritual is the how. It is the switch that turns the factory on before delivery. And here's something genuinely encouraging. Unlike dietary changes, which require sustained effort over every meal, every day, with constant decision-making, this ritual is one decision made once a day. One clove, 90 seconds, before your largest meal. That is it. The simplicity is part of the power. There is no complex protocol to follow. There is no list of foods to avoid or track. There's nothing to count or measure. There's just one small, deliberate act of communicating with your own nervous system. Now I want to address a question that comes up often when I share this with people. And that is, if this is so effective and so well supported by physiology, why is it not more widely known? The honest answer has several parts. First, there is no commercial incentive to promote it. No pharmaceutical company profits from people chewing cloves before meals. No supplement brand has a stake in improving vagal tone through natural sensory stimulation. The things that get funding, research attention, and marketing are things that can be packaged and sold. Free, simple, home-based practices do not have a lobby. Second, the medical system is oriented around treating diagnosed conditions, not optimizing the functioning of a system that has not yet broken down catastrophically. Most doctors, myself included, for a significant portion of my career, are trained to respond to illness, not to maintain wellness. The gap in that approach becomes most visible in midlife, when the gradual deterioration of systems like the vagal digestive connection creates a long, slow slide in quality of life that is not dramatic enough to be treated, but is real enough to be deeply frustrating. Third, this kind of intervention does not produce results in 3 days. It produces results over 3 to 4 weeks of consistent practice. And we live in a world that is not particularly patient with gradual improvement. People want to feel different by tomorrow, but the body does not reorganize its neurological baseline in a weekend. It reorganizes it through repetition, consistency, and time. If you are willing to commit to 30 days, you will have data, your own body's data, not a study, not a statistic, your personal experience of what it feels like to have a better prepared, better functioning digestive system. Here is your 30-day challenge. Every day for 30 days before your largest meal of the day, do the following. Sit down quietly, put your phone away. Place one whole clove in your mouth, chew it slowly and deliberately for 60 to 90 seconds. Feel the warmth, notice the saliva, be present in your body for those 90 seconds. Then eat. While you are doing this, pay attention to 4 things. How heavy or light you feel after meals. How often and how intensely you experience bloating. How strong your evening food cravings are. And how your energy feels in the 2 to 3 hours after eating. You do not need to use an app or a tracker. You just need to be honest with yourself about what you notice. Write it down if that helps. Or simply trust your body to give you the feedback you need. By day 10, most people notice at least a subtle shift. By day 20, it usually becomes clear. By day 30, you will have enough personal evidence to decide whether this becomes a permanent part of your daily routine. I believe it will. You are not declining. You are not falling apart. You are not simply getting older in a way that cannot be influenced. Your system needs clearer signals. It needs to be spoken to in a language it recognizes. And the language of slow, intentional aromatic stimulation before meals is one your nervous system has understood and responded to for your entire life. After 50, health becomes less about fighting your body and more about communicating with it. Less about restriction and more about preparation. Less about willpower and more about understanding the signals your body needs to function well. When you restore the signal, the system responds. In the next video, I am going to walk you through the one common evening habit that most people over 50 do that completely shuts down vagal activation for the rest of the night, even if they have done everything right during the day. It is something almost everyone does. And once you see what it does to your nervous system and your metabolism while you sleep, you will not be able to unsee it. If this video gave you something real today, please subscribe so you do not miss that one. And if you found this helpful, please share it with someone over 50 who has been quietly struggling with the things we talked about here. They may not even know there is an explanation for what they are experiencing, let alone a solution this simple. The longevity guide linked in the description below walks through all of these rituals in a structured daily plan designed specifically for adults over 50. It goes into more depth on several of the mechanisms we covered today and adds 2 additional practices that work alongside this one. Thank you for spending this time here. I will see you in the next one.